I think hopefully we are live now. Can you guys hear me? Do we have voice at last? Oh, hurrah! Hi, Stacey. Thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully, fingers crossed, you guys can hear me. So, oh, dear me. Yes, hooray! Thank you, Stay Safe, for that confirmation. What a relief. It means I'm not just talking into the empty ether. So, indeed. Great stuff. Well, let's make sure the show is recording as well. So, we are recording as well. Fantastic. Right, guys, welcome back. Great to see you. Yes, of course, welcome back to another day, another perspective. And today's show, a packed show as always. Of course, today we're going to expose the sophisticated, exploding information war as New Delhi fights to control that global narrative that, of course, it is currently losing. And we'll begin, unsurprisingly, with Operation Hardball, that explosive, newly unsealed US federal indictment targeting vast transnational criminal syndicates. Well, while Western intelligence documents a brutal pipeline of extortion, international drug trafficking, state-linked political assassinations, well, you name it, it's all there. But in the meantime, the Indian media machinery has, surprise, surprise, launched a high-intensity counteroffensive, weaponising legal nuances, or otherwise as we call it, clutching at straws, to claim a total clean chit, as they describe it, for the Indian government. Well, meanwhile, the digital battlefield has gone global. The highly controversial film Satluj has been scrubbed from international streaming platforms as well, under intense pressure from New Delhi, triggering a massive diaspora backlash and, interestingly, a wave of underground physical screenings. Yes, and we have loads of footage of that open defiance. So well done to the diaspora all around the world for finding ways around that. And finally, we head to Australia and New Zealand, where Prime Minister Modi's recent tour was met with fierce protests. Well, what a surprise again, forcing highly organised nationalist groups to then deploy aggressive counter-tactics to reclaim the streets, or at least try to. All this and more on today's packed show, and great to see you guys are there watching me live, which is really encouraging to know that I'm not talking into nothing. So welcome you guys, nice to see you again. So let's get on with the show. And, well, where else to start with but Operation Hardball, indeed. It is rapidly becoming one of the most sophisticated high-stakes information wars that's ever really happened between Western federal law enforcement and the media machinery of Delhi. On July the 7th, last week, the United States Department of Justice, flanked by the FBI and Royal Canadian Mounted Police, unsealed 3 sweeping federal indictments. Well, that was the result of a years-long covert mission codenamed Operation Hardball. And those documents expose a vast multi-continental criminal network operating directly under the noses of global intelligence. I do suspect they did know about it, though, clearly. Anyway, but the Western legal consensus is actually pretty clear. These indictments lay out an intricate web of extortion, international drug cartels moving thousands of kilos of cocaine, amongst other drugs, across borders via long-haul trucking networks, and most crucially, a highly organised, state-linked pipeline for transnational political assassinations, including, of course, that June 2023 execution of Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia. So, whilst Western press treats these indictments as a definitive legal exposure of a deep, systemic rot, an equally powerful counter-narrative has suddenly been unleashed across the Indian subcontinent and, by implication and then by extension, across the global diaspora. So this is not a simple denial. What we're actually witnessing is a very typically highly strategic, multi-layered propaganda campaign designed to completely flip this script, to neutralise the Western allegations and retake control of that international conversation, which clearly they've lost. So I want to break down the specific legal evidence of Operation Hardball and examine the precise tactics that Indian media and, of course, Hindutva nationalist groups through the IT cells and what have you, and examine the precise tactics that they're all using to fight back. So, there's a page of likely faces. Now, to understand the scale of this propaganda war, you've got to first look at the sheer weight of what the US Justice Department has actually put on the record. Operation Hardball targets 37 distinct defendants across 3 major India-based transnational organised crime groups. Chief among them, of course, the notorious Lawrence Bishnoi and the rival, or one of his rivals, Jagu Bhagwan Puria and his syndicate. And according to the unsealed court filings, Lawrence Bishnoi, despite being locked away in a high-security jail in Ahmedabad in Gujarat, he's been running a decentralised global empire using smuggled contraband cell phones, encrypted VoIP applications, you name it, high technology, from his jail cell. So the DOJ details a chillingly corporate recruitment pipeline. Coordinators in India entice, seduce, whatever you want to call it, impoverished, poor miners, vulnerable youngsters into the gang with promises of money, local fame, you name it. It's a very typical gang sort of methodology. We have it even here in the West. And once proven that they're loyal to these gangs, these members are then systematically sent abroad to Western nations like the US, Canada, and even here to the UK on fraudulent student visas and foreign worker permits, effectively embedding sleeper cells, operational sleeper cells, inside our diaspora communities. You guys know they're all out there. We've reported on it. We know they exist. So the indictments paint a very dark picture of day-to-day operations, managed by, of course, these trusted regional lieutenants. Satinderjit Singh, better known as Goldie Bra, he's named as the North American Director of Operations, leader, whatever you want to call it. He's the area manager for North America. Operating from Canada. And then we've got Rohit Gadara coordinating the European arms from safe houses across here in Europe, across the European continent. And these cells don't just traffic drugs and narcotics. They enforce this climate of absolute fear, and refer to last week's show when I obviously gave a lot more detail of that. But in California alone, federal prosecutors documented all these extortion attempts, up to $5 million from diaspora business owners, backed by late-night drive-by shootings and other high-profile attacks, etc., etc. It's all pretty nasty stuff. But the most explosive element of the indictments that came out of Hardball was the element that directly connects these street gangs to the machinery of the Indian state. And really, that is all wrapped up within this documentation of systemic institutional corruption. And this is where the nuances start to come into play and start to become important in the narrative. So the Department of Justice specifically charges that these syndicates have actively corrupted and partnered with law enforcement and government officials inside India to facilitate their global extortion schemes. Now, consider, for example, the case outlined by federal prosecutors from April this year. A Bishnoi associate operating illegally in Stockton, California, threatened a local victim and immediately passed that victim's identity back to a corrupt station house officer inside the Punjab police. And within days, that corrupt officer fabricated criminal charges in Punjab and falsely accused the California victim's elderly father and sister of a murder back in January. And the corrupt police officer then used the leverage of those manufactured charges to then extort hundreds of thousands of dollars from the family's relatives back home. So that's just one example. And this is the stark visual calculus of the Western prosecution. It's a seamless loop where transnational street violence in California or Vancouver is then directly enabled, protected and monetized by state actors inside India. You start to see the links, of course. And this is no surprise to you guys who've got relatives back in Punjab. Of course, many of you have even spoken to me directly to tell me the awful tactics that India uses to target. If they can't reach you in the diaspora, they go for your family back in Punjab. And yet, the moment that these indictments hit the public domain, the Indian media system reacted. And it reacted with a coordinated, high-intensity counteroffensive. Surprise, surprise. And rather than treating this exposure of massive global drug cartels and corrupt police officials as any sort of scandal, mainstream Indian outlets immediately declared a total narrative victory. I mean, believe it or not, the core of the Indian media's counter strategy relies on a highly selective reading of the US legal documents. And this is a tactic best described as strategic containment. Basically, high-profile commentators right across the board, including somebody called Shekhar Gupta and his widely viewed analytical programs, they all immediately seized on one single specific nuance in that US legal approach. Because the US indictments technically charge Lawrence Bishnoi and Goldie Brar as independent criminal actors, but don't explicitly name high-ranking diplomats or cabinet-level Indian officials in the core racketeering counts, Indian media has then jumped on this and weaponised this as a total clean chit from Washington. In other words, it's a clean slate. We've been branded innocent. That is their take from this. But that is not actually what has happened whatsoever. So the narrative that's being pumped out, of course, to hundreds of millions of domestic viewers in India goes like this. The United States has officially ruled out any Indian government involvement in transnational assassinations. Okay, right, yeah. And according to this view, the unsealing of Operation Hardball completely destroys the long-standing allegations made by Justin Trudeau back 2-3 years ago, reframing the entire Nijjar assassination not as a state-sponsored hit, which obviously it was, but as a routine, localised gangland turf war over drug transit routes. Really? So by focusing exclusively on the criminal labels used by the Department of Justice, Indian state media effectively erases the documented links to corrupt police officers, to state-protected prison communication channels, and instead presents this highly sanitised version of events that totally shields New Delhi from any broader accountability. Again, they've just seized one little part of it and spun a whole story of innocence around it. But that is absolutely not the case. And this media push is of course heavily reinforced by influential diaspora advocacy groups. And I'm sure you guys have been on social media since Operation Hardball was announced. I've noticed it. This absolute tsunami of Indian outlets, all the way from little influencers all the way up to the mainstream, have swamped social media with counter narratives saying, oh, we've been vindicated. It's just proved that India wasn't involved. The Indian state wasn't involved in these assassinations. Again, all based on this single one total misinterpretation of this legal indictment. And the Hindu American Foundation, yes, this foundation that we regularly dip into, we visit because it's always good for a laugh, the HAF. They, unsurprisingly, of course, they are a well-known mouthpiece for Hindutva. They are one of the first, I would say, larger outlets and official outlets that always jump on these stories to try and push a counter-narrative because, of course, they've got a large diaspora viewership. Well, they quickly released a comprehensive digital briefing that provides the framework for their pushback. So, I'm going to play you 2-3 minutes. The video that they produce is, I don't know, it's about 20-25 minutes long. It's just, you can almost write the script. I mean, I could almost, I could write the script myself for what they would say. I'm just going to play you 2-3 minutes. This is their main sort of core argument that they're pushing on this.
So on that narrative, basically based on the indictments and then also some statements from the RCMP in Canada, this side is now saying that India conclusively had nothing to do with these killings, and the RCMP said that there's no evidence to that effect. Now, of course, something could come out later on in the investigation, but I think what this says is that there's no conclusive proof either way. So to make broad sweeping statements at all is probably inaccurate at this stage of the investigation and at this stage of where the indictments are. But again, people are trying to push their narratives and trying to play, and kind of prop up their own agendas, etc. I think the other thing, and then I'll pass it to Raj, that I think is important to note here is that these gangs have been involved with, at least on the Canadian side, have been involved with a Customs Border Security Patrol agent, I believe. I don't know how.
CBSA.
Oh,
CBSA.
yeah,
I don't know
that's
how
interesting.
up in the
So you guys have got no sound on the video. That is a disaster. That's another technical issue I'm going to have to address. Oh God, it never ends, does it? Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, well, let me just jump in then. I'll summarise actually what these guys said. So if you've got no sound, I'll basically explain what they said. I'm just going to pick up. There we go. Corgi 101. Thanks for your comment. Vindicated. No, actually, they really won't. And this is essentially what I'm trying to explain. If you stay with me, you'll hear a lot more about this. But this indictment in no way, shape or form vindicates the Indian state. Quite the opposite. And clearly you don't understand how Western legal due process works. They work in calculated legal steps. Just because it doesn't mention the Indian state specifically at this step does not mean that is going to be the next indictment or that further evidence is about to be released or whatever. It has not said explicitly the Indian state is not involved in this. The whole implication, the whole presumption, just reading between the lines of this, is essentially that these actors were instruments of the Indian state. Anyway, so this HAF video, which again is a great shame you can't hear it, but essentially their argument is around this whole thing. They argue that the legal analysts systematically decouple that violence from the Indian state. And the briefing highlights the exact wording of the California indictment. They emphasise that the FBI's evidence paints Bishnori's network as a self-sustaining, self-contained, profit-driven criminal enterprise. And they're arguing that the gang's primary motivation is financial extortion, international narcotics trafficking, not the execution of a foreign geopolitical agenda. In other words, not acting on behalf of the Indian state. And the HAF explicitly targets Western media and intelligence frameworks. And they're arguing that linking prison-run extortion gangs directly to top-down foreign interference by Delhi is, in their words, a profound analytical mistake. And from their perspective, framing this as a state-directed operation is a dangerous distraction manufactured by Western commentators. Essentially, these guys at the HAF are saying the whole thing is just manufactured. It's a manufactured story. It's basically it's anti-India forces trying to blame India for this. In other words, it's just saying it's all made up, as proven by the DOJ indictment, which is absolutely untrue. Interestingly, also, in that section there, which again, it's a shame you can't hear it, basically, this guy also says that there are references to a Canadian border agency officer also being implicated, which apparently he was, so I gather. And they had this guy on the CBAS, I think they're called, or CBSA, whatever, under the Canadian Border Force. There was a corrupt official on there that was working with these gangs to then facilitate, obviously, the traffic of drug-carrying trucks. And this guy used that argument to say, clearly, it's not the Indian state that's behind it, it's the Canadian state. So one of their counter-narratives is to say, they've totally turned this around and said, it's not India, the Indian government, it's the Canadian state that is behind this. Which actually is interesting because it also reflects and resonates with that interview, which we did, it must have been 6 months ago, with the Indian High Commissioner, the new Indian Commissioner in Canada. What was his name? Patnaik, I think his name was. And on CBS, which channel was it? Yeah, I think it was CBS, on an interview, he actually then turned the whole narrative when the lady was interviewing him and saying, look, India is behind the murder of Najjar because Trudeau's said he's got credible evidence. Again, he turned it around and said, no, it is all made up by Canada. It is actually Canada that is behind all this because Canada is supporting terrorists. It is hiding terrorists, and therefore it is the Canadian government that is effectively acting as terrorists. So you can start to see the agenda that India is trying to push to reframe this whole argument. It wasn't us, it wasn't the Indian state, it's your state that's behind it. Which is, of course, laughable, but that is India. That is how they operate. These are the arguments they're using. And they're insisting that the real immediate threat is no foreign government, but rather the failure of Western law enforcement to protect the diaspora, to protect you guys in Canada, America. It's your government's fault. It's not India, actually, who's the ones who sending the killers. It's your own law enforcement that's at fault in this. That is their narrative. And the HAF, through this whole twisted narrative, is attempting to basically completely shift the blame away from India onto Western domestic policing. And worse still, not the distraction technique trying to pin more blame on the CBSA, effectively trying to imply it's actually it's Canadian state criminality. So, again, this is why I sort of sit here almost chuckling about this. It's laughable. But the counter-narrative purposefully ignores the glaring contradiction that make the independent gang war theory fall apart. If you look at it closely, the most glaring hole in the Indian media's defence is the sheer logistical impossibility of Lawrence Bishnoi's operational reality. How does a man held in a maximum security, state-run Indian prison in Gujarat manage to coordinate the transport of thousands of kilos of cocaine across the US-Canada border? How does an isolated gangster arrange for the fraudulent issuance of student and worker visas through official state channels to deploy operational hitters abroad? And most importantly, how do localised street gangs gain the intelligence required to locate and target high-profile political dissidents on foreign soil without some level of state-level data sharing? It just cannot happen. And the Indian propaganda machine avoids these uncomfortable questions just by employing a second, deeper ideological defence line, the narrative of national security necessity. Parallel to all the official denials, nationalist commentators are now dropping to a more aggressive implicit argument. They're reframing the targets of these operations, like Bhai Najjar, not as peaceful political activists or, of course, religious leaders, but, of course, here we go again, they are active, dangerous terrorists who threaten the sovereign integrity of India. And therefore, that seems to justify it. So in this context, the narrative subtly shifts from India didn't do it to, well, even if these criminal syndicates did it, they eliminated a security threat that Western nations, your governments, were harbouring. So it's sophisticated doublespeak that satisfies international legal deniability, but at the same time stokes domestic national pride. They're appealing to their nationalist masses in India. And what Operation Hardball ultimately exposes isn't just a massive transnational criminal enterprise or conspiracy, but a profound split in global reality. To the Western legal eye, the unsealed documents provide a terrifying look at a modern, highly adaptable form of, you can almost call it grey area warfare. It's not black or white, it's somewhere in the middle. It's basically where a state can utilise decentralised, highly violent criminal syndicates as proxy forces to conduct political assassinations, to enforce censorship, to terrorise diaspora communities abroad, all while maintaining a layer of plausible deniability. So, it's laughable. So, anyway, to the Indian state media, the exact same set of documents is being weaponised as the ultimate proof of innocence, and focusing entirely on the gangland identities of these guys. It stinks, and as I say, it's laughable because it ignores the deep infrastructure of institutional corruption and prison-enabled communication that's endemic in India. It's allowing people like Bishnoi and Bhagwan Puria to operate these global criminal enterprises from prison cells. And you guys in India think, nah, India didn't do it. You honestly think these guys are innocent in their prison cells. You don't think they have a hand in these cells, despite everything that they say. You've got to be a little bit. Well, I think you can work it out. But anyway, so the true battlefield of all this, Operation Hardball, It's not just inside the federal courtrooms of California or whatever the FBI's brief is. The real war actually being fought right now over the narrative control of the diaspora around the world, dictating whether these operations are seen as a brutal crime wave run by just rogue actors or in reality a rogue extension of a state power designed to silence dissent across international borders. We know the truth, and the truth is coming out. So anyway, let's move on to really a very much a related story because again, I talk about a tsunami of propaganda. Well, here's the other foundational pillar of what's going on and really holding India up to the mirror, because this is an equally intense front in this ongoing information war. The digital battlefield, of course, surrounding this release of the film Satluj. And for 3 years, this project, which obviously originally entitled Punjab 95, was, it was blocked behind all these bureaucratic obstacles, the censorship machinery of the Indian state, the Central Board of Film Certification. They basically locked the film in legal limbo for as long as they could. They demanded all these 127 cuts. They demanded the character names were changed, the title was changed, you name it. I mean, basically, they did everything they could to try to stop it coming out. And the reason for the state's intense anxiety is, of course, what the film talks about. It chronicles the real-life crusade of Bhai Jaswant Singh Kalra, played by Diljit Dosanjh. And his work in the early 1990s uncovered, of course, a really dark, awful chapter of institutional violence. It was a systemic pipeline where Punjab police allegedly, well, I use the word allegedly, I mean, there's enough evidence out there to say they did abduct, murder, and illegally cremate thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not even hundreds of thousands of unidentified Sikh youth, normalising mass murder as some sort of tool for professional promotion, whatever. And Bhai Kalra himself was then abducted and murdered, and tortured, of course, in between, by police officers in 1995. So, for years, the film's producers rightly resisted the censor's demands. And then, last Friday, July the 3rd, they executed this brilliant digital flanking movement. They capitalised on the fact that over-the-top streaming platforms, the OTT platforms, don't fall under that direct legal jurisdiction of the CBFC, the censors, and they quietly dropped that film onto Z5, as you know, under this new title of Satluj. Let me play. Oh, I was going to say, I'll play you the trailer in the background so you can see it. For those of you who might not have seen it, but of course, got no sound. But anyway, if you've got no sound, there you go. It's blasting in my ear, but you guys can't hear it, sadly. Anyway, so the release sparked. Oh, sorry, you can't see it. There you go. So the release of this film sparked an immediate wave of digital engagement right across the global diaspora. For 48 hours, viewers watched this film and what film critics have called an unflinching cinematic exposure of state intimidation. I mean, the reviews have been just extraordinary. Shot with a dark, nocturnal atmosphere by their cinematographer, a guy called K.U. Mohanan. It directly, of course, challenges the state's narrative. It frames the critique not as an anti-national diatribe, but a profound defence of human rights against rogue police actors. But this window of open access was, of course, brief. Sunday evening, July the 5th, the Indian central government hit back. They used emergency provisions under Rule 16 of the Information Technology Rules 2021. The Ministry of Information and Broadcasting bypassed standard regulatory delays, citing urgent national security concerns, and Z5 was issued an immediate mandatory directive to pull the film down. Surprise, surprise. And within minutes, of course, the domestic stream then went down. But July the 11th, 2 days ago, the compliance pressure from Delhi went completely global, with Z5 stopping Satluj entirely from its international libraries across North America, Europe and Asia. So it ended up with a total global ban. And the global removal really marks a critical escalation in this digital censorship. And it proves that Delhi can then effectively dictate what diaspora communities are permitted to watch on private international streaming services. How can that be? However, this information war didn't just end with the digital blackout. The moment the film leaked out onto pirated networks, the Indian nationalists and the Hindutva, IT cells, you name it, they then launched a massive coordinated counteroffensive to try to reclaim the narrative. I saw it. I guess you guys on social media have not been able to miss it either. Social media has been absolutely swamped with Hindutva trying to reclaim the narrative, trying to basically lie, spread misinformation, trying to reframe everything. And it wasn't, this defence of the ban wasn't just any sort of passive defence. It was an aggressive thing. And it's part of an aggressive campaign designed to reframe that whole historical context of the Punjab counterinsurgency. And the tip of that spear in this media counterstrike has been the deliberate high-intensity rehabilitation and idolisation of this guy, Kanwar Pal Singh Gill, the notorious former Director General of the Punjab Police, universally known as KPS Gill, or, as we call him, the Butcher of Punjab. This psychopathic bully who has more blood on his hands than most dictators have, frankly. So on mainstream networks like Republic TV, Times Now, you name it, you just go onto Godi Media, it's all over. And also across nationalist digital channels, commentators have weaponised Gill's legacy as a direct ideological antidote to the film. So it's, let me just, here we go. This is, what have I got here? Here you go. This is just one random example I picked up. NDTV, a well-known Godi Media channel. So this is just one of countless examples of the Godi Media just totally reframing the narrative of this guy, the Butcher of Punjab. And you've got hashtags right across social media trending. Of course, you've got, 1.4 billion Indians in India. So it's not hard to get a hashtag, particularly when it's pushed by nationalist extremists, to go viral. And one of the hashtags is the super cop who saved India. And these have been pumped through social media. And the narrative being aggressively pushed by these Hindutva and IT cells and nationalist media houses like this completely flips the moral axis of the film on its head. And in their narrative, in this nonsense narrative, this guy, the Butcher, is portrayed as some sort of flawless national hero who single-handedly crushed a violent Pakistan-backed Khalistani insurgency that threatened to tear India apart in those years. And high-profile panels feature veteran intelligence officers, police figures, who all argue that the extreme extrajudicial measures depicted in the film Satluj weren't criminal abuses of power, but they were an unfortunate, necessary methodology that was necessary to restore peace, to preserve sovereign integrity. And during these broadcasts, commentators explicitly address the core claims of that film, Satluj. They argue that focusing entirely on the illegal cremations exposed by Kalra is a deliberate act of historical distortion. And they're saying it's deliberately designed to demoralise Indian security forces. It's designed to reopen old wounds. Oh, bless. Sorry, and all that. If, we remind India of one of the greatest travesties of so-called democratic justice that subcontinent has ever experienced. Even the British weren't as brutal and acting so illegally as KPS Gill. I mean, what KPS Gill actually overshadowed things like the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, which was a British shame, And they're asserting that during this insurgency, it was marked by massacres, bombings, all sorts of targeting, killings of civilians. Standard policing methods were useless. And so by idolising KPS Gill, the Hindutva narrative explicitly validates the use of totally unconstitutional, totally illegal warfare against the citizens of Punjab. So the message being sent to, well, both domestic audiences in India and the global diaspora is clear. Any police excesses committed under Gill's command were entirely justified by the ultimate goal of national survival. Well, I think I've got a few comments to come on that. Stay tuned. They're framing the film not as an asset for historical truth, but as a piece of what they claim is sophisticated psychological warfare, trying to destabilise modern India. But this aggressive attempt to rewrite history through the idolisation of this controversial, and that's an understatement, police chief, has completely failed to suppress the film within the diaspora. In fact, actually, I'm delighted to report it's triggered a classic manifestation of what's called the Streisand effect. By aggressively pairing a corporate ban with the public glorification of this butcher, the state has unified diaspora resistance. And across the UK, North America, all around the world now, independent venues, gurdwaras, community spaces have transformed into makeshift underground cinemas, bypassing centralised, sorry, I'll just show you, there you go, bypassing all these centralised Indian servers using countless other pieces of technology. Thousands, tens of thousands now. In fact, it has to be hundreds of thousands now. Judging by IMDb, there's over 100,000 reviews on IMDb now. So hundreds of thousands are gathering in physical spaces and have watched this film uncut. So the state's counter-narrative hasn't silenced the conversation. It's turned the simple act of watching Satluj into a direct political defiance against both corporate censorship and New Delhi's historical revisionism, rewriting history. I'm going to show you some joyful pictures. Here you go. I'll play this whilst I talk to you. But here on the video, you can see all these showings. There's probably 2 or 3 minutes of this. All around the world, people sitting on the ground in front of these public showings. So the global controversy surrounding this film proves that the modern state no longer relies just on blocking information, it's now seeking to overwhelm it by combining digital takedowns with an aggressive ideological campaign across the media, idolising figures like the butcher of Punjab, KPS Gill. Delhi's attempting to redefine the boundaries of historical truth. They're trying to rewrite history. But the rapid mutation of Satluj into an open source underground symbol of cultural survival shows the limits of that strategy. And for the diaspora, the state's aggressive defence of that counterinsurgency has only reinforced the core warning of the film. So the information war over this film is no longer just a debate over film censorship, it's now a permanent multi-generational struggle over who gets to write the history of Punjab and whether those extrajudicial actions of the Indian state will be remembered as a heroic necessity or an unpunished crime against humanity. So, in answer, really, to India and Hindutva, a final word on this, really a message to India from us here in the democratic West. Even if the so-called militancy of the 1980s and 90s was anywhere near as unacceptable as they claim, even if it wasn't just a simple defensive fight for literal survival of the Sikh people against that murderous persecution by the Indian state, then any nation that calls itself a democracy doesn't crush it through mass, unaccountable, extrajudicial mass murder. No, that is not what democracies do. Democracies do it the hard way, but the correct way. It suppresses it through legal, accountable means that are transparent through the rule of law. It uses law enforcement, even the army if necessary, but always through due legal process. Courts of law, evidence, trial by jury. It doesn't disappear somebody that a policeman thinks they don't like the look of. It doesn't vanish them in the middle of the night to then go be tortured. It doesn't murder them in false encounters or secretly in police station cells and then secretly cremate their bodies anonymously to hide and bury the evidence. But India did this. There is no hiding from that fact. And KPS Gill presided over that. It was his responsibility, overseen by the Indian state, who encouraged it. A democratic nation also recognises its shameful past and criminality and takes responsibility for it. That is what a democratic nation does. It doesn't try to dress it up and rewrite it or hide it. Take the example of us here in the West, where we are constantly putting the lens of accountability on our own past. Even as, actually ironically, as India does to us over our colonial empire days. Because we're not afraid of accepting responsibility for our past sins and then trying to account for them. That is what a genuine civilized democracy does. So when both mainstream Indian media and cohorts of Hindus across social media try to somehow justify the actions of this butcher, and by extension the Indian state, they're proving that India is just not ready to be a democracy. It is not ready to preach anything to the world about democracy, about human rights, about the rule of law, or indeed anything other than state-approved mass murder, along the lines of Stalin, Hitler, Pol Pot. Until India admits its guilt and its role in this mass murder of Sikhs during those decades, it has no moral authority, and indeed cannot claim to be a democracy governed by the rule of law. It remains essentially a banana republic, along the lines of North Korea, Iran. In simplicity, India should just be ashamed of itself. So, on that note, let's move quickly on to the final story. So this is Modi's visit to the Southern Hemisphere, where, of course, he has his diplomatic tour across Australia and New Zealand. And it's just wrapped up. And the official itinerary focused on multi-billion-dollar trade deals and strategic alliances, all the same old, same old. But the real story took place outside those diplomatic halls. And again, I'm going to show you a little bit of video in the background. There they are, the wonderful Khalistan flags. So for years, New Delhi has successfully used these international trips as public relations exercises. But recently, a highly organised change has actually occurred. The global Hindutva ecosystem has come to a bit of a realisation. Modi's high-profile trips to all these countries overseas are increasingly being swamped by relentless, highly visible Khalistan protest. Well done, you guys. Khalistan Zindabad. Armed with the explosive transnational evidence from Operation Hardball, these groups are successfully winning the international narrative. They're forcing Western media to look past all these photo opportunities and press conferences, whatever that Modi's trying to hold, and focus instead on the darker realities of state-sponsored intimidation, human rights issues inside Modi's India. Now, interestingly, in response, pro-Modi organisations, Hindutva primarily, have also shifted their strategy and realised that they're losing this visual war on our streets out here in the Western democracies. They've actually transformed their diaspora base into a much more organised counter force designed to aggressively try to neutralise these guys. Well, so there they go again. I always chuckle when I look at him. He's blowing his nose on the Indian flag. I think there'll be a few upset Indians from that one. Anyway, so yeah, it is a new, highly coordinated pushback coming from India, from Hindutva particularly. And it was particularly on display outside Melbourne's Marvel Stadium on July the 9th. It was about 4 days ago. So, of course, they were anticipating a huge turnout of Khalistanis and human rights groups, basically intent on highlighting all the Indian regime's suppression, persecution, all the human rights abuses, etc. But the nationalist network, the Hindutva forces, deployed then an aggressive shield. So, unsurprisingly, there was no political debates, no talk, no arguments, whatever. Instead, pro-Modi organisers deployed the Janagar Jana Dol Patak. Again, excuse my pronunciation. Basically, it's a massive, highly organised drumming assembly. So the moment that Khalistani groups began chanting and raising their wonderful flags to make sure that the Western reporters could see them, the drumming group then unleashed a huge wall of sound. I mean, you know how loud drums are. And then, of course, backed by thousands of Indian Hindus chanting Modi, Modi. So ultimately trying to drown out the protesters. So clearly it's a new tactic that they're adopting. Interestingly, though, that they've had to adopt it, which in itself is a backhanded compliment to you guys out there on the streets waving your wonderful Khalistan flags. And sadly, the same playbook unfolded in New Zealand, in Auckland, a couple of days ago on Saturday, outside Spark Arena, where a dedicated line of Khalistanis set up a striking protest and actually displayed a life-size mannequin of Modi in prison clothes, as quite often they do, to obviously symbolise state-sponsored violence. And let me just play another video. Here you go. So here you go. These are these guys facing off in Auckland. This is the Hindutva counter-machinery that was ready. And within minutes, a pre-arranged crowd of over 100 Hindutva loyalists swarmed the area, forming this dense physical perimeter around Khalistanis. Of course, waving their Indian flags to try and block the Khalistan banners that were on view. And they obviously launched into a series of chants. So the strategy was clearly designed to overwhelm the space, to isolate the critics, and try and make sure that the only narrative that anybody could hear was, unsurprisingly, the Hindutva narrative. Same old, same old. But really, what's going on here? It is revealing a new tactical evolution in this information war out in the diaspora. So the Hindutva machinery knows it can't just prevent the truth about Modi's India from coming out. The global West is seeing it. I'm going to play you once a little bit more of, where are we? Here we go. I'll just play a little bit more of these guys. There you go. That's Modi arriving at one of the arenas. Oh, no, that's at the Sofitel hotel. Anyway, so the Hindutva machinery knows that it's failing. It knows it's losing the narrative. It knows that these guys, well done to you guys, every time the cameras are there, the Khalistan flags are there, which is making Western media ask questions. This is what they're terrified of. So they're having to change tactics. Hindutva are terrified of this. They're realising they're losing the war. As I keep saying, they are losing this war. So they've had to highly organise new crowds to engineer noise, visual saturation, anything to try and keep these guys from the spotlight. But I'm happy to say they are losing. They are still, it doesn't matter. You still, as I often say, you cannot hide the truth. The truth always prevails. So well done to you guys down under, New Zealand and Australia. Well done to you guys for turning out in good numbers, loads of Khalistan flags. The message was out there. It doesn't matter that Hindutva was there. Ironically, it serves our purpose even more because Western media, there's even more people there. So even more media converge and say, what's this all about? And they start to ask questions, which is why you guys, all standing there with your flags, well done to you. You guys get the opportunity to educate them, to explain the truth, which is wonderful. So, as I said, this is why we are winning the information war. So well done to you guys down under. Right, on that note, let us zip across seamlessly to our comments. Thank you to you guys for all your comments. Let's zip through these. I've got 25 to get through in this new sort of format style or whatever you want to call it. So anyway, nice to see you guys all commenting as well. Thank you for all your comments. They're on such tiny writing. I can't actually read them quickly. But anyway, thanks for all your comments as I'm speaking. Do keep them coming in, much appreciated. But let me zip through some of the comments left after last week's video. Truth is life or death. India, being a Hindu country, is a Sikh enemy since Guru Nanak's time. Yeah, I mean, this is where it all comes from. The day that Guru Nanak Dev Ji announced and realised that his morality was totally separate from his Hindutva environment, his Hindu environment. He rejected that whole caste system. He understood the reality of the Hindu system, of the caste system, and he rejected it. And from that rejection, he gave birth to this new wonderful religion of Sikhi. So ultimately, they have diverged since those centuries ago into what it is today. And that division will never, ever close. There can be no closing. And all these people who argue Sikhs are Hindus just don't understand the truth, the academic truth, really, of what Sikhi is all about. It rejects so much of the fundamental foundations of Hinduism. It has alliances. It agrees with many of the things, as does Christianity, as does Islam. But the foundational basics of Sikhi are fundamentally different to Hinduism, and therefore it is not Hinduism. It has no relation to Hinduism. So anyway, but thank you, Truth is Life or Death. And you're back again. Hindu state creates butchers. Hinduism is a cult. Hindus are fundamentally thanklessness people. Now, I'm going to jump in here, as I often do. I am not anti-Hindu. I actually have had in the past Hindu friends, and they've been wonderful, dear friends, wonderful people. And I will never say a bad word about them. You can't paint all Hindus the same. But Hindutva, the Hindu extremists, definitely, I think we've all got a case against. And likewise, when I see Hindus who are so indoctrinated on social media, and I've jumped in, and I shouldn't, I tried to resist. I've jumped into social media and I've got into arguments with these people and tried to say, look, just open your mind. Stop being so indoctrinated by the Gaudiya media, this nonsense that you're being fed, this diet of misinformation and twisted truth. But they don't see it. They just don't see it. And I don't think you will ever change their minds. Really? But anyway, can you blame them? They're just sheep. Safety muffins. Every crime is designed and done by Hindutva. Yeah, absolutely. But named for minorities. But actually, the key word there is Hindutva. It's Hindutva who are behind this. Not Hindus per se. And don't forget, again, we call it playing devil's advocate, but I always jump to the defence of Hindus, at least to a large degree. For example, during the genocide, 1984 genocide, there were many Hindus who harboured Sikhs, fleeing literally for their lives. They invited them into their homes, literally at the risk of their own lives. So there are good Hindus. This is why you can't paint all Hindus as bad people. But Hindutva, you can, because they are the extremists. And it's all extremism across the board that we always reject. And, you say Hindutva is the same as Hindus. I disagree. I have to courteously disagree with you on that one. They're not. They are the extreme ends of Hindus. And, let's just agree to disagree on that one. We could talk for hours on that one. It's an almost academic argument. But I respect your view. That is your prerogative. But as I will always continue to do, I have no personal truck against Hindus, but I do against Hindutva. That is my personal perspective. You guys are obviously in a much more vulnerable position and probably are better qualified to pass judgment, which I, of course, do respect. Anyway, let's not get down that rabbit hole. Bit FPV. Barbaric Hindu pirates. Oh dear, the Hindus are getting a bit of a pasting. Looting everywhere, the world, every brutal activity, you name it. Why doesn't the West get together and do something about this? Essentially, I think is what this comment is trying to say. It's easier said than done. Because the overriding agenda, the overriding interest of all Western nations, almost without exception, is money. Money, the root of all evil. It's money that drives agendas. Not human rights, not even morality. It's money. This is the sad tragedy of the human race. Greed is one of those sins that we just cannot erase. And it is, I often refer to the 1 in 10s, it is the 1 in 10 of us who are genetically driven by greed and the pursuit of power. They are the ones in our society that drive this. The rest of us, the 9 or 8 out of 10, are just ordinary human beings who just want to get along with our fellow human beings. We don't want to fight, argue, whatever. We just want to get on with our lives happily. Anyway, the commercial clerk. India is Hindu. I don't know if this is a rude word. I didn't Google it. I'm not going to repeat it just in case it is. But I think the sentiment is very clear. Gurmit Singh, great show. Thank you for that. Indian state and Modi helping dismantle itself. Yes, this is really what it's all about. They are their own worst enemies. It is incompetent. It is a terrorist state. Khalistanis Zindabad. I mean, I totally endorse those words. Because ultimately, the reason that India will break apart, and it is an inevitability, it's going to happen one day, because you cannot continue a regime on this trend line. If you continue the way that India is going, it can only end in one way. It can save itself from the brink, but it does not have the desire or the intention to do so, which is why inevitably, you're right, it will dismantle itself. Cam KZ. Every country has human rights issues. Yes, you're right. Thank you for that comment. You are right. But it's all a question of degrees. It's relative. Are our human rights abuses here in the West worse than India? I would argue no. We're not perfect, but the difference is we can call it out. We can hold our governments to account. Whereas in India, if you try to do that, the NSA, the UAPA, all these legal mechanisms are then used against you to shut you up. That's the difference. I can sit here and I can shout and bawl and complain about our government. I can use rude words. I can do that freely without, hopefully, a knock on the door. I didn't do that in India. Anyway, Cam KZ, after watching the movie, yes, the police should be ashamed of themselves. I couldn't put it any better. Their modus operandi hasn't changed. They're still at it. This is the awful thing. Every police station in India still has a torture cell. Come on. As you rightly say, there is only one answer to this. There can be only one solution to this. There is no other solution other than Khalistan. B. Sandhu. Please can you also shed light on Biant Butcher? How bad was he? Oof. Where to begin, B. Sandhu? Where to begin? Actually, this is a good point. Maybe I will do a separate piece one day on Biant Singh. He of course was the Chief Minister, Punjab, during a lot of these times. And he equally shares the blame as the butcher, KPS Gill. And actually, he seems to have got off, I wouldn't quite say scot-free. Well, actually, arguably, most of them have done. But the spotlight has not been on Biant enough. So maybe it's his turn next. Maybe I think we should also do a piece on Biant the Butcher, Biant Singh, Chief Minister of Punjab, who actually has an equal level of guilt in that mass murder of Sikhs during those years. So thank you. Abtadillah, nice one. Calling him a butcher is giving honest butchers a bad name. My apologies to all you butchers out there. You're absolutely right. It's sadly, maybe it is the wrong word to use. But you give me a better adjective to describe KPS Gill. But ultimately, yeah, you know what I mean. He is. I mean, you say he's a nasty piece of work. As I often say, just look at the man's eyes. And it's not just one photo. It's almost every single photo. This is the thing that struck me. Every single photo, he just has that look. And I've come across it, as I said before, in people who essentially are psychopaths. They're bullies. They are the real bullies in the world. They're missing something up here. They are capable of the most extreme violence, the most extreme brutality, and have no conscience. These people exist. The world has sadly had so many examples of KPS Gills. It's just genes. It's just nature. These people exist, and he is one of them. So, yeah, is he residing in hell? Who knows? Maybe one day we'll all find out one way or the other. But ultimately, yeah, it's he doesn't. How in any way, shape or form, as you rightly say, could he represent the gurus? Of course he couldn't. Stay safe. Hi, stay safe. You're online at the moment anyway. Big greetings to you. Stay safe. KPS Gill is not a hero. And you say he actually died from peritonitis, appendicitis that exploded. I was going to say something very unkind, but I won't actually about KPS Gill. They often say, don't speak ill of the dead, but unfortunately we have to. You know, just because the guy is dead doesn't mean he gets a clean sheet and we all have to praise him. Sorry. But ultimately, yeah, his title should be taken away. He wasn't a super cop. He was a butcher. He was a brutal bully. There's just there are no redeeming features that I've ever found other than Hindutva trying to say he was a super cop. You cannot justify his actions. A man who sexually assaulted a woman and got away with it. A man who kicked a young student to death protesting and got away with it. And a man who oversaw the murder of hundreds of thousands of Sikhs. Just explain to me in any moral framework how that is okay. Amakara. Long comment. I'll have to zip through this, unfortunately. But yeah, this is about IMDb, actually. Interesting. I did check. You said, has it been pulled from IMDb? No. It's over. When I looked earlier today, 101,000 reviews. I think it's 9.5 out of 10. So don't worry. Don't worry. The wonderful thing about the internet is you cannot suppress anything. You can bury it, you can ban it, The internet, as I often say, it's like holding a balloon in your hands. It will always find a way to bubble out somewhere. There's always a way out. So thank you for for saying that. But yeah, as you say, Kalra wasn't only fighting for Sikhs, he was defending human rights of all Punjabis, Hindus as well. Because actually, ironically, we see on social media many of the Hindus saying, yeah, during this time, Hindus were murdered. Yeah, that's the point. It wasn't just Sikhs. It was Hindus who were murdered during that time as well. You know, anyway. 1S1 and 2. I think you're online. I saw you online as well, 1S1 and 2. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for your comment. He murdered many Hindu families. Yeah, here you go. Many of the Kardkus, the martyrs, Sikhs, were from Hindu families also. Yeah, it was indiscriminate. And interestingly, the Cats, these were Sikhs that were recruited by Gill and his police force. They were essentially paid. They were threatened with their lives or comply. So they were paid to then go out and murder people, including Sikhs, their fellow Sikhs, and of course Hindus. So many of these Hindu victims were murdered by agents of KPS Gill. It's unforgivable. Mr. 403, leave me a comment to see if Modi removes it. I'm delighted to report you survived. You made it. It got through. I'm going to have to hurry up because we've already got a few minutes left. But anyway, delighted to see they managed to keep their hands off your comment. Stay safe. This is a long one. We really don't have. I've only got about 2 minutes left, if that. And I can't really talk about this, but actually, it's a shame because you've got personal experience. This is why when I see on social media the Hindus saying, "Oh, it's rubbish," you know, it was justifiable, it was this, it was that, or it wasn't true, it was exaggerated. There are so many personal stories, people who were personally affected, as indeed you were, stay safe, by these dreadful, unforgivable events. So you cannot deny the brutality and the truth. This is why the truth will always prevail, because there are so many of you out there who experienced it first or second hand. Just be a call, good information. Thank you for your comment, much appreciated. And a love heart from Agam as well, much appreciated. Oh, Softy Muffins, absolutely. Spread it. We need more views. Get more people out there. Come on, guys, spread the word. Subscribe, share, do all that YouTube type stuff. And a load of ice cream cones or whatever, Softy Muffins. I don't know what they are. I'm not very good on emojis, but I think they're a good thing, so thank you. And Satsri Akal from Gimone Growell, thank you. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Navraj Valect, Puria, Satsri Akal, and sad faces. I think that sums up a lot of today's show. Good one. Thank you. Likewise, your comment. Oh, this made me laugh. Harjit Dugal. Why without pants? Look. Yes, unfortunately, it is still baking hot for you guys in the UK. You know what it's been like. We're just not used to this. We're in the 30-something degrees, which is 90s or something in the other measure. It's painful. I'm actually dying, I have to say. In this, I nearly did it, jacket off. But yes, unfortunately, I've got to keep my pants off because it's just so hot. Otherwise, I just melt into my seat. So, anyway, thank you for noting that. Yes, here we go. Towards the end of the show, of course, the final sign-off to you guys. Narinder Kaur, welcome, Narinder. Thank you for your comment. Khalistan Zindabad, that is indeed what we're all about. Let me just flash that up. There you go. Oh, hello. What was the comments disappeared? Oh no, was I not showing the comments? That was a bit of a disaster. I don't know. Anyway, well, apologies to you guys. It's just I've got so many buttons to press. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screens looking at me, all showing me information, and I have to cram a lot of it into this one screen here. So, to be honest, I'm absolutely out with the fairies half the time, trying to work out what's what. Anyway, my apologies if you guys didn't see the comments. I've got all these buttons in front of me as well, which is even worse. If you didn't see the comments, here are all your comments. There you go. So zipping through them, just in case you can always freeze your screen if you want to check. But anyway, they were all the comments. Thank you guys if I didn't show them. And as I say, the final sign-off, the final honour, as always. Khalistan Zindabad, Narinder Kaur, thank you, Narinder. CR7 World, Vahiguruji Ka Khalsa, Vahiguruji Ki Fateh. Khalistan Zindabad. Cross Kirpans with a huge tick, thank you. And Murgiv Logs Rinku, if I pronounce it correctly, does get the final honour of the show. Thank you to you, Khalistan Zindabad. Indeed, that is why we're all here. Much appreciated, you guys. It's been another live show. We did get there in the end. I have no idea, really, why it doesn't work sometimes, but you have to keep telling me. When I go on live, jump in straight away, tell me if you can't hear anything, etc., etc. Just so I can see, because I don't know what's going on from this side of the camera. Anyway, but that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. I will be back tomorrow, God willing, same time, 5 p.m. UK time. That's 5 p.m. or whatever it is on the West Coast, you guys. Anyway, you can work it out. 5 p.m. UK time. I'll, all being well, be back here live again with tomorrow's show. Do let me know your comments. Do drop comments below the video if you're watching it in post afterwards. And do send me an email, message@satlujtv.com. Thank you to you guys who have emailed me. Much appreciated, as always. I always do appreciate your links that you send me. I do read them, and I have, as you see, I do use them. But that is it for another day. Oh, gosh, it's been another hot one. It's been another long one. But as always, it's great to see you guys online. Much appreciated. It's really encouraging to see you guys there commenting. I see all the comments streaming up. Of course, I can't read them all as I'm talking, but I will, of course, review them afterwards. But you do know, guys, I do appreciate it. Even you guys who came on, I think, from the Hindutva perspective to try and argue against. Again, I do appreciate that as well. Always love to pick up you guys, those comments, and have a sensible, civilized discussion about it. So anyway, don't make it rude. Keep it sensible, and we can always have a sensible debate about it. But that is it for another day. I'll catch you guys tomorrow, God willing. Have a great night.